The Sleeping Giant Awakens, the United States in World War II. Imagine a nation vast and powerful, yet deeply committed to staying out of a conflict raging thousands of miles away. That was the United States of America in the late 1930s. Europe was ablaze, and Asia was caught in a brutal imperial struggle. But America was focused on its own survival, still reeling from the Great Depression. The national mood was strictly isolationist, a conviction that these were old-world problems that Americans should not be drawn into. The arsenal of democracy. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, understood the danger. He watched with mounting horror as Nazi Germany conquered Europe. He knew the Allies, Great Britain especially, couldn't stand alone. But how do you help a friend when your hands are tied by public opinion? FDR found a way. While publicly maintaining neutrality, he began to turn the nation into the arsenal of democracy. The Lend-Lease Act of March 1941 was his masterstroke. This act allowed the U.S. to lend massive amounts of war materials, tanks, planes, ships, and food to nations deemed vital to American defense, primarily Britain and later the Soviet Union. It was a clear signal. America was committed to defeating the Axis, even if not yet on the battlefield. Factories, dormant during the Depression, roared back to life, churning out the machinery that would ultimately save the world. The Day of Infamy. The spark that ignited the sleeping giant was not in Europe, but in the Pacific. On the peaceful Sunday morning of December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy launched a surprise, devastating attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In a few terrifying hours, the heart of the Pacific Fleet was crippled. The shock and rage that swept the American public were instantaneous and absolute. The next day, Roosevelt addressed a joint session of Congress, declaring the date, a date which will live in infamy. Congress immediately declared war on Japan. 3 days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's Axis partners, declared war on the U.S. The debate was over. America was in the war. The global war machine. Once committed, the transformation was staggering. The U.S. mobilized with unprecedented speed and scale. The economy, American industry performed a miracle. Production lines that made cars were converted to make B-17 bombers. Shipyards built Liberty ships faster than U-boats could sink them. The sheer volume of material produced by the U.S. overwhelmed the Axis powers. The GIs. Millions of young men were drafted or volunteered, becoming the legendary GIs, or government issue. They were trained and deployed to two vast separate theaters of war, Europe and the Pacific. The home front. Women poured into the workforce, famously symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, building planes and tanks while the men fought overseas. The European triumph. In Europe, the U.S. Army and Air Force joined the British in the difficult fight against Hitler. American forces first saw major action in North Africa, or Operation Torch, 1942, and then invaded Italy in 1943. However, the defining moment came on June 6, 1944, D-Day. Under the command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, over 150,000 Allied troops, including tens of thousands of Americans, stormed the beaches of Normandy, France. This massive undertaking opened a crucial second front, relieving pressure on the Soviet Union in the east. From the hedgerows of France to the devastating Battle of the Bulge in the winter of 1944 to 1945, American troops fought relentlessly across Europe until Germany finally surrendered in May 1945. The Pacific island hopping. Meanwhile, the war against Japan was a brutal, different beast. It was a grinding campaign of island hopping, where American Marines and Army soldiers fought bloody, desperate battles to take small, heavily defended islands closer to the Japanese mainland, places like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. These battles were characterized by fierce Japanese resistance and unimaginable casualties. The ultimate goal was to establish bases from which to launch a final invasion of Japan. The shadow of the atom. The end of the war was marked by one of the most controversial decisions in history. Facing the prospect of a devastating invasion of Japan that military planners predicted would cost millions of lives, both American and Japanese, President Harry T. Truman, who succeeded FDR after his death in April 1945, authorized the use of a terrifying new weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6th and 9th, bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The power of the nuclear age was revealed, and just days later, Japan surrendered. The United States emerged from World War II victorious, but forever changed. Its involvement had been decisive. The nation was now the world's preeminent military and economic power, ready to step onto the global stage, not as an observer, but as a leader, ushering in the age of the Cold War and the complex New World Order.